Welcome to East Lansing City Council discussion only meeting, Tuesday, September 13th, 2022. We'll begin with the roll call.
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Brookover.
Here, unbelievably.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor
Nobody's ever
Bacon.
applauded just for me showing up to a meeting before. a little bitter.
Present. Next up, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, communication from the audience. With communication from the audience, please fill out one of the blue forms for the record. When you approach the front towards council, you have 5 minutes, and please state your name, full name for the record. Thank you. You can do it after.
Okay. Hi, my name is Barbara Anderson. I live in East Lansing. And I heard an interview on WKAR this week. I thought it was going to be on the agenda tonight. But anyway, it was an interview with Nicole Biber. And it was on the subject of renaming Abbott Park an Anishinaabe-based name. And I fully support that. I think it'd be a great opportunity for more awareness and education in the community, like through signage and discussion about the native peoples that were originally here and are still here. And so I support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional comment. Anyone in the online queue?
Yes. Okay. Caller with the number ending in 386, you're welcome to address council. Okay, they've left, so I'll move on to the next one. Caller with the number 244, you are welcome to address council. Caller with the number ending in 244, you're welcome to address council.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm calling in support of the renaming of Abbott Park.
All right.
Short and sweet.
Okay.
Thank you.
Caller with the number 827, you're welcome to address council. Caller with the number ending in 827, you're welcome to address council. You may need to unmute if you hit *6. Okay. Caller by the name of Kristen, you are welcome to address council. Kristen, you're welcome to address council. Caller with the number ending in 551, you are welcome to address council.
Hi, I am calling as a parent of an MSU student, and I don't know how this works, to be honest with you. And I was just calling to address or question if there is anything being done to increase security around the downtown area in light of the recent violent reports. I don't know if that's going to be addressed here or not, but that's why I'm calling it.
Thank you.
Okay. Caller by the name of Sarah, you're welcome to address council.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. I am a parent also of an MSU student, and in light of the recent uptick in crime in the downtown area, I'm also calling to see what we can do about beefing up security for this, hopefully just short time frame. I don't know why there is such an uptick, but I talked to the police in the East Lansing area, and they did also report that there is an uptick in crime. It's not just our imaginations, and that they are a bit short-staffed, as well as probably most police departments are. People aren't wanting to go into that field, it doesn't seem like these days. And what can we do? I asked, are we able to grab other officers from other areas and beef up the security? They said, no, it's their jurisdiction. They have to be within, the taxpayers pay the money for those particular areas. They're not going to loan us officers from other volunteers. What can we do as parents? What can we do to beef up the security in terms of the patrolling, and just especially that Albert MAC area just seems to be a lot of crime going on the last couple months.
Thank you.
Caller by the number of 827, you're welcome to address council. Kristen, you are welcome to address council. Kristen, you may need to unmute your device.
If you're having technical difficulty and unable to get through, feel free to put your comments in writing for the record and send it to the whole of council for the record. So we look forward to receiving that. Okay. Is that? Yeah. Next up, communication from council. Councilperson Brookover.
No, thank you.
Councilperson Babcock.
Yes, I'd like to note that one of our community members, Mr. Bob Steele, was inducted into the Michigan State University Sports Hall of Fame last week. He's been a member of the community. He actually won 2 back-to-back NCAA titles in 1966 and 1967 in track and field. He and his lovely bride then went to Europe. They came back and settled in East Lansing, where she has worked elections and been part of the city staff. And it's always really wonderful when you're out and about and you hear these stories, and it sort of makes you realize what an incredibly talented and devoted community we have. I have received calls from parents about the crime I've spoken with some others in the community, and I'll defer to the mayor for more on that. So thank you.
Councilperson Watson,
Pass, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Yeah, I want to welcome Mr. Brookover back to the table. I think this is the first time that we've had a full council seated in months. We notice. You're so quiet, though. So it feels good to have the whole team back together again. I think, I don't know, it's felt a little bit odd, our meeting flow, so I'm glad to have us all back together. I think the mayor's got more up-to-date information about what's being done in our downtown, but I will just say that I share the community's concerns. I think we had one incident on this Saturday evening that was of particular scope to make people quite concerned. We had a large amount of gunfire, which is always very disturbing, and I think that without talking too much about things I don't know too much about, I will say that it does seem like our police department has got a lot of evidence to follow, and I'm hoping that we get some positive news on the resolution of that case fairly soon, or at least an update. But it's also of a type that seems not random. That's not a great vocabulary sentence, but I would say the fact that the police don't seem to think that there's a threat to the community at large is kind of pertains to the fact that it's confined to a specific group of people. I think I can say that. So maybe Mr. Mayor's got better information than I do. Maybe not. I shouldn't put that on you.
Yeah, we'll start with, there's really so much good stuff going on, but just out of respect to this weekend, I'll pile it into next meeting in my comments. But yeah, we will address these issues. It's a matter of, we all know that public safety and public health and our commitments to that. And as far as public safety goes, it's paramount to everything else we want to do in the city. So I've always said if we want to grow, we have to be able to secure our growth. So it's just that important, along with safety of the students, the neighborhoods, and as we've said a million times, downtown is a neighborhood. So it's as important as any other neighborhood that we make sure it's secure and safe. Police are already working on this. There is a lot of, they have a lot of evidence and other things that they're working through, and we'll keep the community up to date on everything that's taking place. We'll continue to meet and work on, obviously, our clear strategies and tactics moving forward. We'll engage with downtown businesses and everything else, every other stakeholder in the downtown, to make sure everyone's on the same page with how we're going to proceed moving forward. And we'll give you really good sight lines and transparency with our communication and what we're doing and the steps that are being taken to make sure the downtown area is safe, along with other parts of the city and everything else that's going on. And obviously, this isn't isolated to East Lansing, so we'll be prepared both in how we proceed and worst case scenarios and everything else along those lines. And we're well aware of the need for preparation and other things at this time. It's no longer isolated to certain zip codes or anything like that. This is just a common thread that's running through our country right now. But we'll be prepared, and we're aware of the challenges, and we will call our partners to bear to make sure that East Lansing's a safe place to do all the things that we've committed to live and to spend time and to bring your whole entire family here. That's our commitment. So we'll move forward with that. We will keep you abreast of everything as we move forward, and we make a commitment to a safe experience, to continuing our tradition of celebrations, and moving forward and being the type of town where people feel safe to celebrate and enjoy major events. And that's our commitment moving forward. Next up, communication from the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So I will echo your comments. Obviously, with the people with the shots fired that occurred on Saturday night, we have seen, like the rest of the country, an increase in people carrying guns, an increase in people carrying guns illegally. Obviously, it's a great concern of ours. Our police chief, I've spoken with him several times since Saturday night, they're investigating this crime, but we're also talking about preparation with our regional partners to make sure that we can properly police the downtown in terms of the resources and support our officers need to effectively do their jobs, to make sure that they can safeguard the downtown and the whole community. So we would expect to be able to share more information with the community in the coming days, but we are actively working to make certain that we have a safe downtown day and night for our residents and for our students and for our guests. So that is something that is top of mind for us, and we'll be, like I said, working with our regional partners and departments to make sure we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, item 6.1. This is a special presentation from Julie Pingston, Greater Lansing Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I want to, kind of put a pin in that, and this is one of those positive things that's taking place coming out of the post-pandemic. There was a lot of positive inertia on visitation and the things that are taking place in the Lansing area, and this was an area of major concern for the economy of this region and hospitality in general. And I'm believing that Julie's going to bring us up to speed on what's been taking place and how we're moving forward in these areas. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all for having me here today. I'm pleased to be back with Mr. Brookover's first meeting since we go back a long time, so good to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to give an update about the Greater Lansing region's hospitality and tourism industry. It's a definite industry for this community. We have a very strong mission. Our mission is to positively impact this community's quality of life by developing our region as a visitor destination. So that's what we work to do every day. And, we've had a strong history. We've been an organization in the community for 63 years, and we were very excited to celebrate 60 years in 2020, but that got a little bit derailed. So I have personally been with the organization 29 years. I took leadership of the organization in March of 2020. So that was a great day to shut down our entire industry because everything that we promoted, wanted people to come to this region for, to East Lansing, to Mason, to St. John's, everything that we promote and do was not allowed, not possible, not safe. So we have rebounded, as Mayor says, slowly, but slowly is my favorite phrase. My colleagues up north are in a little different situation with a little thing booming a little bit more up in that neck of the woods, but one of our key measurements is hotel occupancy. As you can imagine, that's where every visitor basically will stay and spend money, and the longer they stay in those hotels, the more money they give to our community to then bring that new dollar into to our use here as a region. So there was a slow week in late March of 2020. We got to 17% of hotel occupancy. I don't even know who those 17% were, quite honestly. A lot of first responders, a lot of medical professionals, et cetera. We are now sitting at about 53.6% occupancy year to date. So we ended 2020 at 40%, we grew to 49%, and now sitting at about 53.6. I will tell you, some of the great energy happening right now does emanate from this area. We've got a welcome week when all the students return to campus, and East Lansing in specific, we hit 92.7% hotel occupancy. So that was a really strong week, and it just continues now with the football schedule that we have. We hit 80-some% on the Labor Day weekend, when the rest of that week, other than the football time frame, was a little slower, being that a lot of people went to northern destinations to do that last summer getaway. So we feel that we now have a sustainable path forward as an organization and have flexed back up our staffing. We got down, we had 29 people, we got to 5. We're back now to over 20. So I feel like we are on a good path that way as we move forward to promote all the great things in this community. It does make us really understand and realize that the key visitation to this community derives from a few strong things that we've always known, but we're very laser focused on those things now, which are meetings and conventions, amateur sporting events, and the energy and synergy around campus that parents coming in, friends coming to visit students, all of those add to the visitation for this community. So we have some challenges, no doubt. We still are working on a workforce. Our industry was the first to shut down, the last to open up, and jobs just are not attractive to some people now because of that. We had a lot of people that might have part-timed at, a hotel. Maybe I'm going to work 2 days at the front desk. I'm retired. It's fun. They're not doing that anymore. They have left us. So we are very short-staffed throughout all of our industry. Hotels, restaurants, attractions, everywhere is definitely got a staffing issue. The issues that were brought up already today about security and safety are definitely a visitor concern as well, and that's something that I believe that was already mentioned. It is in many destinations, such that I'm serving on a task force at our international organization for destination marketing organizations about safety and security and gun violence. So trying to bring back best practices from other communities that hopefully we can implement and continue to better our community and make a difference here. So those are some of the issues that we're challenged with every day now, instead of just doing the fun promotion and getting people to come here. So I do want to bring up a couple of events just to wrap up my time. I don't want to take too much of the night, but we do have some really exciting things on the books for coming into this community, especially into influencing this east side of the region. And starting off at the end of September and early October, we're hosting the NCAA Division III men's and women's cross-country national pre-nationals. So that's like a warm-up. They come to this course that's going to be at Forest Acres. They run their I don't know, their path, their marathon. It's a cross-country. I don't know how far it is, but they run. They're going to run. And that's a warm-up for then the national championships for NCAA Division III will be coming up at the end of November. So we're looking forward to that being in the community. We also then have welcoming back the Michigan High School Athletic Association later this fall for girls golf and boys tennis. That's something that hasn't been here in a bit. And if you're not familiar, East Lansing already does host the MHSAA state finals for men's and women, or boys and girls basketball. And then we also host baseball, softball, and girls soccer. So we're becoming a hub for the MHSAA in a very positive and good way. We also are going to be hosting in mid-November the U.S. Figure Skating Nationals Midwest Regional. Those are people who will be future Olympians, and they're qualifying to go to the games here in East Lansing, Michigan. So we're looking forward to welcoming that event. And then to wrap up the year in our sports arena, we've got NCAA Division I Men's Golf Regional at Eagle Eye in mid-May. So all those events are coming to town, and they're all going to be utilizing restaurants, hotels, shops, all throughout the community, and really looking forward to our amateur sporting events coming back. I think a great point for our organization is it's our Greater Lansing Sports Authority that brings all of these events to the community. We partner with Michigan State University, but we're the one driving the bus to bring those here to secure those events for this community. So we are very focused on continuing to bring those type of events here. And then the last thing I'd like to mention is hopefully many of you are familiar that you've seen a very large-scale event that comes here every other year to campus. It's Odyssey of the Mind. It's a competition for creativity. It's competitors that come, typically, we're not sure how many they're going to have, but in the past they've had 8,000 competitors. They come to our community to spend literally 14 minutes over the span of 4 days to compete. So they have a lot of free time. They are going all over the community and really enjoying not only interacting with teammates and competitors from around the country, but also from around the world. Usually brings about 15 countries, 40 some states, so it's a really big impact to this community. If you're not sure you've seen it, it's usually a pack of like 8 kids walking around in matching t-shirts. So they'll be coming in May, later May, right before the holiday weekend time frame. So we host that every other year. They've gone virtual, they've gone hybrid, and now they're 100%. They were in Iowa in May, and so now they'll be back here with us. So we look forward to welcoming them. So as I said, we've got a lot moving forward. We're really excited about the prospects of this destination and what we can offer as a community to those traveling here. And if I can answer questions or do anything further to help this community move forward, if the ideas you might have, we're always open to listening and hearing new ideas. We appreciate the support of East Lansing, the different facilities that are here that we're able to market and promote, the different hotels, the different restaurants, the different wonderful things to do in terms of attractions, things to see and do, and we always enjoy your support. So thank you for the time. Appreciate being here. I don't know if special presentations have questions, but I'm around. I did leave you with a graph that shows the deep dive of the last couple years of our occupancy, and the average daily rate at the top is the rate charged. I also left you with our it's not dated, but we don't date anything anymore, but this is our annual visitor guide. It is the first time since we started these guides in 1992 that the state capitol was not on it, and it's the Graduate Hotel in East Lansing overlooking campus. So that was a nice cover shot for this year. So thank you for the opportunity.
Stay put in case they have.
Okay, staying put.
Don't run off. Any questions? Any comments?
I will just say that I was an Odyssey of the Mind nerd when I was in high school, so I always love it when they come to town. The energy is absolutely fantastic.
So we understand there's a big slime challenge this year, so the community might sell out of glue, is what we've been told.
Nice.
Stay tuned.
All right, we'll stock up.
Yep.
And then I'll just state my always position. I really believe this region, I know should be and will be someday, once even after I'm mayor or whatever else, the hub for travel sports in the entire region, if not country. And I know that's something that would boost tourism and travel. And that's my mission, to accomplish that at some point and really aggravate Indianapolis and other areas by what we do here in travel sports. So I know that we'll continue to talk and get some people to the table, and we're going to accomplish that goal where we will be the hub for all travel for the state of Michigan and the region. So yeah.
Let's do it.
You got it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Next up, item 7.1. Discussion of updates to Policy Resolution 2021-17 regarding Community Development Advisory Committee.
Good evening, Council. How's it going? My name is Matt Apostle, pronouns he, him. I'm a Community and Economic Development Specialist here with the city. Here tonight, per Council's request, a very quick and dirty presentation about Policy Resolution 2021-17. This is the one that reestablished the CD Advisory Committee, and specifically the membership of that committee, which we're going to be talking about tonight. I'll also take a look briefly at what I could find regarding the history of this committee's membership, just for your reference, and then we can have a nice little discussion. Alrighty. So yeah. What is Policy Resolution 2021-17? Approved by East Lansing City Council on October 5th, 2020, that is supposed to be 2021. Policy Resolution 2021-17 reestablished the CD Advisory Committee and detailed the committee's responsibility and composition. The three major responsibilities are going to be reviewing applications for Cdbg funding, holding public hearings, and making budgetary recommendations to East Lansing City Council. And then it codified the following membership for the CD Advisory Committee. We have 2 representatives on the Human Rights Commission, 1 representative from the Housing Commission, 1 representative from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission, 1 representative from the Seniors Commission, 1 from Transportation, and 1 from the University Student Commission. There is also a non-voting council liaison. So to kind of dig into that history a little bit, at first, there was a much smaller amount of diversity on the committee in terms of commissions, but a significant number of representatives from the HRC. When it first started in '96, there was 5 HRC reps, and then there was 1 rep from Housing, 1 from Historic District, 1 from Planning, and 1 from Transportation. Over the years after that, it kind of expanded out. University Student Commission got a representative, Senior Commission got a representative, and then the commission was gotten rid of briefly around 2018, 2019, and then it was brought back in 2021. And if we go to the next slide, In that reboot of the CD Advisory Committee, when we brought the resolution, we removed the Planning Commission and the HDC, and we added the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission. And then also you can kind of see progression throughout. Various amounts of HRC reps have been on the commission. By the end of the CD Advisory Committee's first tenure, they were down to 2. We brought them back with 2. On the right of this PowerPoint slide, we can kind of see boards and commissions with consistent CD Advisory Committee membership, HRC, Housing and Transportation, and then sort of like the graveyard / current residents of the CD Advisory Committee below that, with how long that they were on the commission, for your reference. Also very important to note, there's currently 7 commissioners on the CD Advisory Committee, and council recommends that we keep an odd number, no matter what y'all want to end up doing with the committee's composition. But yeah, so just a few questions for today's discussion that I want y'all to keep in mind. Would council like to make changes to the composition of the CD Advisory Committee? And then if so, what commission should have membership on the CD Advisory Committee? And how many members should the CD Advisory Committee have? Depending on what your discussion leans y'all towards today, staff can draft a resolution, bring it to you next Tuesday, and then we can, that should keep us pretty on time for the timeline that we've discussed for laying out the CD Advisory Committee for this next fiscal year. Thank you. Let me know if y'all have any questions.
I do have, just to frame the discussion that we're about to have about the membership, can you just give me, or us, I guess, a real quick and dirty summary of what we are allowed to spend community development block grant money on? Is that possible to pull that out of your brain with no notice?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So community development block grant funds are used for low to moderate income individual and neighborhood investment. Primary uses for the funds in the past have been on public infrastructure improvements, think sidewalk improvements, think park improvements, as well as housing needs. We've had a very historic down payment assistance program managed with Capital Area Housing Partnership, as well as homeowner rehabilitation. There's also 15% of the funds it is capped at that can be used to be given to nonprofits as subrecipients of the funds. Consistent ones in the past have been Haven House, End Violent Encounters, Tri-County Office on Aging. The rest of the funds usually go to a 20% capped admin fund. Think paying people like me to talk to you guys about Cdbg, as well as public meeting notices, things like that.
And then I do have one kind of clarifying question. So the housing assistance is facilitated through a nonprofit, but is not part of that 15% cap. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true.
And that's because it's going, I guess, can you explain to me why that is exempt from that cap?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Awesome.
So there's like 18 or 19 eligible activities for CDBG funding. One of them is public service. Another 2 are down payment assistance and housing rehabilitation. We could work with any nonprofit as a subrecipient that was doing any eligible activity outside of the public service category, which is sort of a general direct benefit or area benefit to low to moderate income people. And they wouldn't have to be subject to that cap.
Okay.
There's also many other eligible activities that we don't necessarily do in the city of East Lansing, and let me know if you want to know about those.
I mean, you know I do, but probably not for tonight's discussion.
We'll see.
So I have one request of you before you come back to us with something, and that is, in your history of the CD Advisory Committee, you say the original committee created in 1996. I would just request that you go back farther, because I served on this committee or commission in its infancy in the 1970s. Now, I'm aware that there's some statutory changes since then, and I am aware that this may have morphed into something else, but I think it would be interesting for the council as a whole and me just to try to recall some things as to going back into the 70s and early 80s in terms of who was actually on that committee or commission. I think it was a commission. I think it was called the Community Development Commission, but I can't swear to that. And I think it would be interesting to go back in terms of the mix of things that were contributed to back then, because I think that might impact the kinds of considerations we're looking at in terms of who should be on the committee and things like that. So I would just ask, I don't think that's a really difficult task. I think you can go back and find that stuff, and I think probably I was on that committee in maybe 76, 77, 78, but I do remember having fairly substantive conversations back then about which, I'm going to loosely use the term, social service kinds of things we contributed to. Again, with the caveat, I understand that the statutory and policy or the regulations changed a little bit. I don't remember us giving money to sidewalks and things like that. I understand that. But it seems to me that there's a history to this in terms of what the town has wanted to do with these things that goes back farther than 1996. So that's my only point for tonight.
I would agree, and I'd be super interested to chat with you after, as well as kind of dig into the clerk's office records.
You won't get anything from me. I just spent 12 days in the hospital. I can't even find my way home. But you'll have something in the document someplace, I think.
The only question I have and concern I have, Mr. Fehrenbach, is are these records existing in our current city hall, or have they been moved off-site to storage and archived, or do we know where the records are? Just because I'm concerned about that range back of records that we preserve them. So with that, I don't know if you have any knowledge about that at this point.
Are you calling me old, Mr. City Manager?
No, I'm not. I'm just, our storage is limited.
Just be careful.
So.
Historic.
The short answer is I don't know, but we typically keep records. We're statutorily required to keep records for, I think, 7 years in CDBG. So anything we might have that going back that far would likely be in the archive. But I think we've been in the process of cleaning up the archive, so some of those things actually might be technically in City Hall right now.
We will try to find the information for you.
Councilperson Watson?
Can you just confirm the term for the CD Advisory Committee? So if a person comes from Planning Commission, I'll pick a present day. If someone comes from HRC to be with the CDBG Advisory Committee, what's their term?
So the term would be on a yearly basis.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's all my questions for you. I guess I do have some general staff questions, though. I don't think you'll have the answer to this, Matt, but for the Historic District Commission, when they were no longer a part of the advisory committee, did staff or council hear from them that it was concerning?
As an individual, I did not receive any commentary on that. I'm not sure if any of my other staff in planning did.
And I know that, I don't know, how long have you been here? Were you here in 2019?
I was not. It's been a year, like a week ago. So
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank
So
you very
it's just to the staff that are here, to your recollection, and for Planning Commission, when Planning Commission was no longer a part of the CDBG Advisory Committee, was there concern about, from them, about them not being on there?
I was here at the time. I do not recall receiving any concerns, but we could certainly talk with the folks that were the staff liaisons to those boards at the time and see if they recall.
Councilperson Babcock?
Thank you. We create this commission, correct? And certainly it's easier to not end up deadlocked when you have an odd number, but it's not imperative either. But, we've received some communication from members of the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I don't think this is a zero-sum game. I don't see why we would remove Parks and Recreation. I think we could certainly place a planning commission representative back on it. If the group is wedded to an odd number, then perhaps we consider Commission on the Environment, because we think a lot about sustainability. I think that could solve our problems, although I'm sure my beloved Commission on the Environment is cringing, like, oh, who's going to have to attend the extra meeting? But these are incredibly devoted people, and they will find a way to make it work. Perhaps that's our solution, because easy for me to say I attend a lot of meetings, but the more the merrier.
That was actually exactly what I was going to say, was those two, add planning back and the Environmental Commission. I think whenever a question like this comes before us, the immediate thing that I jump to is our goals, our strategic priority goals, and I think that the environmental part of that is what was not currently represented on the CD committee. So that would be, to me, the odd number to add along with planning as well. So
thank you. I don't know how that, I think this was originally Councilmember Watson's issue, so I don't want to step on her toes, and I don't know if I'm missing something in the conversation. So I'm happy to, I don't know if you'd entertain that.
Yeah. As you guys can see from the attachment on the CDBG funding history, Parks and Rec received funding, and my point isn't to say Parks and Rec commissioners shouldn't come and be a part of public hearing or be a part of comments, but as far as being a voting person for dollars that go to Parks and Rec, which to me you would be passionate about, and that's understandable, but does that mean that Parks and Rec Commission should be voting in this process? I think it doesn't, it looks funky to people, and I know it doesn't look funky to the people that are advocating to have voice in this, but I'm just saying from a voting position, this wasn't a time to an attempt to silence any commission's voices or any of the public's voices. We have public hearings, but it's just, I think as far as where a person or in a group belongs or where they don't belong, that if funds go back to the commission that you're from, that you shouldn't be a part of that voting process. You shouldn't be able to vote for that, but you can certainly advocate and talk about it.
And I'll follow Councilperson Watson's lead on having sat on this commission multiple times, and I know she has as well, both in the way in the past and in the modern. Being the most recent person, I know how it's very easy to, in those processes, to sway things even ever so slightly, particularly on the project side, on the social service side. It's not really difficult. So even to the things we work very hard to not even give an appearance of impropriety, I just wouldn't want to even offer the appearance at all if that's what you're concerned with. I understand that, and would support that position if that's even, because that's the attempt we all make, never to kind of give the appearance that we're self-dealing or something along those lines. And I know it's such a small number. In some ways, it's not worth even giving the appearance based on the small dollar numbers that there is any self-dealing. So if that's a concern, I think you've probably done it more times than anyone here. So I know you were doing it way back when I was on HRC. You sat on it multiple times. So I'll follow your lead on this if it's a concern. You did it most recently as well. So that's my opinion.
I have some thoughts that I just want to put into the conversation. So obviously our Parks and Rec Commission is a volunteer board, as all of our boards are, so no individual commissioner would obviously be benefiting from funding coming back to Parks. Parks also has some of our more complicated projects, and I think having somebody on the board that would have, I mean, it's all well and good to invite people to be there in terms of comment and feedback, but I think when you have somebody on the board, they're there to answer questions really specifically, and to answer questions with knowledge of our guiding documents, our 5-year plans, how current projects fit into, our projected future projects. I think the commissioner that sat on the board this year actually kind of volunteered that the original request could be reduced. We then found a way to make up that through a different fund. So arguably having her there kind of provided some insight that allowed the rest of the board to make a decision to kind of reallocate that money. So I don't think it's necessarily, I do kind of understand what you're saying. There's not other, planning commission doesn't have specific projects, and housing commission doesn't have specific projects the way that our parks and recreation does. But our parks are one of our public amenities that are available to every single person in our community. So I think that is highly within the CBDG philosophy. And it has the most complicated projects that could potentially need a lot more explanation than other projects. So in my mind, having that person there really, obviously they're advocating for their projects, but I don't like using language that kind of implies that our different departments within our city are competing with each other. I think unfortunately we are sometimes, because our budget is limited and we have to divide that money, as it is. And so there is kind of a feeling of competition sometimes, but we really are all in this together, and we're looking for a way to create the most public good with the least amount of money, I think is kind of a way of summarizing our working system here. And so having somebody there that knows the history of those projects, I think, is actually very valuable. So I would not be in favor of replacing the Parks and Rec commissioner as much as I would be adding additional commissions that also have relevant history and information. So that's my 2 cents.
And if I may, I understand your point, Councilmember Watson. I guess I'm thinking of this as this is a setup that doesn't really reflect the various city departments, because East Lansing, like the vast majority of cities, doesn't have a social services department. So how I see this board is it's a group of dedicated volunteers who suss out projects, and they share various inputs. They may or may not ultimately vote for the commission they, quote, represent. I don't see it as that tied to the label they come in wearing. It would be an imperfect fit for us because, we don't have a social services department that is, quote, competing for these. I think anytime we can encourage and especially thank people who've taken on these boards and commissions, it only accounts for half as much as we should be doing. And I know the person from the I stand corrected, Parks and Rec is very interested in continuing, and I don't see any reason to deny that. I don't see any reason for anything other than gratitude. And as I look at how the budget has been allocated over the years, I don't see any bias or heavy-handedness. We've had various levels where projects have come and gone, and the funding has followed that. But I think we risk causing, at best, some hurt feelings, and at worst, some greater confusion within the community. I would, again, support, as Councilmember Gregg would, adding 2 people. I think that could resolve any issues, and would add, anytime you add more people to the board, the more robust the conversation gets and the broader the conversation gets.
So does staff from Parks and Rec come to the CDB Advisory Committee meetings?
In my experience, which was last year, staff members from the Department of Parks, Rec, and Arts came for the first meeting, which was when applicants for CDBG funding came to answer questions about the projects. That's typically how we function. There's two main meetings. The first one, applicants for funding come answer questions. The second one, they make the budgetary recommendation. One of the members from Parks and Rec came about the Stoddard Park Improvement Project. Another came about the Youth Scholarship Program.
So I think the staff is the experts, and it's my point too. If the argument is that Parks and Rec can help people along, it's my argument that if that's the case, it seems like they're advocating for something. And it doesn't solve my point that Parks and Rec received dollars, and where it looks bad if someone points out that Parks and Rec received dollars, so maybe they shouldn't vote. If it looks bad for me to say it, it also looks bad for us to have a voting commissioner on there where they receive money and they advocate for and help people understand those dollars. So it goes against my points unless it's maybe the commissioner wouldn't vote on certain pieces, or maybe they would step aside, or maybe if we're saying they come with this extra knowledge, maybe they can come during public comment or write into us. It misses my point on should they be voting.
I guess if I, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're next.
Well, I understand what Ms. Watson's saying, and I think part of this, if I understood hers and my conversation about a century ago, was that there was kind of a herky-jerky flawed process the last couple of years because of the pandemic and people not getting to meetings and stuff like that. So that's out here someplace. But look, I think there's fairly specific guidelines in Michigan statutorily in terms of what constitutes a conflict of interest. And so I would ask the mayor to request from the city attorney an opinion about what constitutes a conflict of interest under state law, and I think our charter and other things. I can't remember if somebody cited the charter. Before we start, labeling people in conflict of interest. I understand what Dana's saying. I get it, and I think if, I appreciate Mayor Gregg, but I happen to think that everybody that goes to this commission is somehow lobbying for money at some level. And just so we make sure, what was the total amount of money we're talking about here?
It ranges from year to year, but typically between like $450,000 and $550,000.
Okay. So now we're talking about $500,000 in a budget of I don't know how many millions of dollars. So, but I just think we ought to have some guidance from the attorney about what the statute says. Now, it may be that after we get some guidance, there are enough members of the council that say, well, yeah, we understand that, but we think people should recuse themselves, is the term we use in court, from this if they have a self-interest or something like that. So I kind of understand both sides of this thing, but these are, after all, volunteers, and we need people to do this stuff, and I don't want to try to diminish the people that are willing to step up in this town and help on these things. So I would just request we get an opinion from the attorney. I don't think it's going to be very complicated because I think it's probably one statute under Michigan and maybe some city charter or city policies. But
I like that. Write that down, Matt.
I'll write it down. I think it's also relevant to note that all the committee members last year signed a conflict of interest disclosure form. Just putting it out there for general knowledge.
Any further comments, discussion?
I think I don't know if this came up. If it did, I missed it, but I also think it's important to note that this is an advisory commission and that we don't have any binding agreement with them to follow their advice. So, and I think we did actually shuffle some of it around at the council level this year, didn't we, Matt?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, so I think if we do see a problem in the form that it comes to us, we don't have any requirement to follow that advice.
yeah, ultimately, we're the deciders. So
Exactly.
buck stops
Yeah.
here.
But And I will input, having sat with parks and things like that, psychically, it's very easy to get behind parks projects if we're trying to, if you're doing compare and wins and being a salesperson, you know, if I'm bringing you this cool swing set or this curb, you know, it's kind of not, so I mean, there's some psychic advantages to that. So when you're presenting, just to be honest.
Well, you got artificial turf at the high school. I worked on that for like 8 years, and I don't know how you pulled that off, but I got nothing.
I'll tell you offline.
I will say I support Councilmember Brookover's suggestion. Let's go back and look at it. Make sure to check the definitions of conflict of interest. But I would also note that being a member of the Parks and Rec Commission, you are not, you know, your job is not beholden to this. You're a volunteer. And some of you will remember when I just lost my mind with excitement about a new kind of park a few weeks ago. And I'm still holding out for that, even though I've never been near the Parks and Rec Commission, and they may not be as excited about this as I am. I'm going to make this happen someday, somehow. But mostly, because people are such devoted and committed volunteers in East Lansing, the person who is there today on Parks and Rec might be on the Commission on the Environment next year and might be on the DDA the year after that and back. So I just don't see people as particularly beholden to the commission. But let's take a step back and let's look at the definitions and perhaps resume the conversation.
I like that. If you're all satisfied, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, item 7.2, discussion of proposed changes to selection criteria and categories for the Crystal Awards.
Good evening, Mayor Bacon, Mayor Pro Tem Gregg, council members. Welcome back, Councilmember Brookover. Kathy DeChambeau, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Arts.
Don't say it unless you mean it.
I do mean it. I do mean it. My sole purpose here tonight is to support staff member Carla Forrest Hewitt. You know her as the Farmers Market Manager and our Community Events Assistant. As her role in community events, she is also our staff liaison to the Crystal Awards and organizing that event, including taking the nominations for that event. Carla has brought forward some great ideas for refreshing this event and hopefully getting more involvement in the event. So I'm just here to support her presentation, and I want to turn it over to her so she can talk about her ideas.
Good evening. As Kathy said, my name is Carla Forrest Hewitt. This is my first time presenting to council ever, so it's a bit nerve-wracking, but I'll do my best. So as she said, I oversee the Crystal Awards, and normally we partner with a city council liaison. This year it's Lisa Babcock, and my role with the Crystal Awards began in 2019. And what is the Crystal Awards? It is a way in which the City of East Lansing and City Council has honored individuals who have contributed through volunteer work in different ways to the City of East Lansing. Next slide. Next slide. All right, so the discussion goals for today is to present some ideas to improve the current Crystal Awards and also to seek council's guidance on these proposed changes. And by doing so, I would want to re-examine the guiding criteria and to look at the current categories that the Crystal Awards have. So a brief history of the Crystal Awards is that it was first held in 1988. So it's a long-standing award ceremony. There have been about 128 awards given, and it has run for 35 years, and that's 35 ceremonies. We even had it during COVID, a little bit hybrid outdoor event, but people still came to honor people for Crystal Awards. And the first ever Crystal Awards were in 1988, as I said before, and the winners of that were Active Living for All, Roy Saper Galleries, and Jacondry Books. I know some of you may be familiar with this bookstore, but it doesn't exist anymore in East Lansing, but a lot of people have fond memories of it. And over these past 3+ decades, it seems as if there have been no revisions to the current selection criteria. Next slide. So this brings me to the impact of the Crystal Awards. It's a well-known ceremony, and past winners, there's one in the room. George Brookover won in 2014, and Liz Schweitzer won in 2005, just 2 examples. And many of the winners are well-known, familiar faces, and they contribute to East Lansing well after they've won an award. Let's see. It's a good platform for the City of East Lansing and City Council to connect with community members and to honor the work that they do, and a great way for us to express our gratitude. Next slide. So before I go any further, I would like to just highlight some of the criteria, just a few of them, because it's a long list, and there is a link that can take you to the full list online as well. So whenever we are looking at a person to be considered for a nomination, the criteria states that this person should dedicate a significant amount of their time to volunteer projects and programs in East Lansing, have a strong commitment to creating a vibrant community here, diversify the economic base, and I also would like to highlight some of the exemptions. So past winners cannot be selected currently. COL, City of East Lansing employees, which is a given, and non-residents are excluded, even though this is not explicitly stated in the guidelines. Next slide. So my goal here today is to renew interest in the Crystal Award ceremony. Last year we had about 4 viable nominations, and nominations get disqualified based on the fact that it's a city employee. We do not look kindly on people who nominate themselves. Because the idea is to have the community lift you up. And then, so renewing interest is a goal. We also want to reflect the city's commitment to being equitable and having standing true to its declaration on being a welcoming place to live, work, and do business. So I think it would be good for us to re-examine our programs and events and look at it through a lens of equity. And so with that being said, the other thing would be to build generational connections, and I can explain that more in the coming slides, and soften past year exclusion. And when I mention this, I think of ALPHA, or Active Living for All. They won in 1988. They have stayed in East Lansing. They continue to contribute. Their staff changes, and it's been a 35-year period. So I think if we were to introduce a 10-year period in which you could be considered again for a nomination, that would be something that would allow for organizations like ALPHA to continue to be honored in our community. Let's see. I also think that if we increase the award categories, that would be a more equitable thing to do and to create more interest, because then we could create more opportunities for different age groups, and currently non-residents are excluded. And I will explain further about that in the coming slide, the category I would like to introduce. But as we know, historically, there have been some things that were in place that created barriers to who could own property and live in East Lansing. And many people, for example, there was one nominee who spent many years in East Lansing, contributed considerably to life here, but yet still they're excluded. And I think that East Lansing is not just an amazing place because of the residents here, but all the people who come here and volunteer and contribute. So another thing that we could do, our goal that I would like us to look at, is to create a youth leadership opportunity and to prohibit self-nomination so that it's clearly stated, and so that we won't have to revisit that. All right, so next slide. So as I said before, increasing the categories. So currently there is a community nomination and a business nomination, and that person has to be a resident of East Lansing. So a young leader nomination or category would be something that would create more interest, include a younger generation, and some of the guiding criteria for that category would be an individual who has displayed all or some of the following characteristics: so exceptional leadership skills, environmental activism, creativity, entrepreneurship, cultural preservation, and strong interest in community building. And it is my hope that young people will feel empowered to develop their leadership skills and learn more about our city organization. And prior to this meeting, I reached out to the assistant principals and counselors of the high school and middle school, which would be the target group for this young leader category. And Assistant Principal Davis gave some feedback, and she thinks that as long as we are directly reaching out to the students and giving them access to the nomination process, they are grateful for this category. All right, next slide. So the next slide would be the Spirit of East Lansing Crystal Award. So this would be a category that could be given to a non-resident. So this could be an individual or group who resides outside of East Lansing but has made significant contributions to East Lansing. And the winner would have to fulfill all or most of the current guiding criteria that we have. Next slide. Lastly, the last category I would like to suggest would be the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging Award. So this would be someone who has gone above and beyond to enhance quality of life in East Lansing, who has strongly championed equity, diversity, and inclusion here, creating a strong sense of belonging for anyone who comes here, lives here, and this would be in keeping with the city's commitment to being a welcoming place to live, work, and do business. that is the end of my presentation to you. I open it up for any questions or comments.
I'll say first, excellent presentation, and you should speak more. I just always love your voice when you're talking to me. So yes, on the categories, that sounds awesome. Perhaps on the, if an individual was to win a second time, it could be like the Hall of Fame, or even a separate category for the individuals that come around again or have done a legacy award, somewhere they've done so much, or maybe they've started a whole new profession and become excellent in that, and we want to honor them again. And like many of these Hall of Fames or whatever, if we don't have a perfect candidate, you take no one. I think that's where these things get a little out of hand sometimes. You know, if you don't have anyone who fits, don't take them. If people have been nominated prior and we're maybe your second choice, maybe we do invite them or someone to apply for them again. If we keep track of that kind of thing, they go on a list or some kind of listserv where, you know, you were darn close last time or something like that. And I think some people in the community maybe just invite, or that we want someone to apply for them, because I know there's many people out here that maybe haven't received a Crystal Award that we can probably think of as a team or as a committee that really should kind of have one for it to make any sense, like a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, or the rest of it makes no sense. And then perhaps even as well, people historical or who posthumously, if there's individuals who've never received one, where we go back and kind of look at our history, and if they're not around or no one's around to nominate, or maybe even forgot about them, where we consider people posthumously or historically for the award. Would be I didn't expect to have this many suggestions, but you started it.
I think this year was the first year we did a posthumous award for Kathy Boyle.
Yeah. That was it for me. I won't say anything else. Questions, comments?
I had the honor of being the council member associated with the most recent Crystal Awards, and it is wonderful to see you here. You did an excellent presentation, and I think you've got great suggestions. I think we'd like to move forward with these. I'm seeing a lot of affirmative nods. So.
I do like Ron's suggestion of kind of categorizing past runners-up. I had the honor of being the council liaison for my first 2 years in this office, and I think my first year, which was the nominations were received pre-pandemic, but we ended up having to do the award ceremony in kind of an abbreviated outside way, which was lovely. But there were a couple of really compelling people on that list that, it was a close run thing that they did not receive it, and actually one that my committee kind of voted for that, I maybe would have picked somebody else, but everyone is very worthy. So that's not to say that the people who won weren't worthy of it, but just that I wished that we could have given out one more as well. So I love that idea of revisiting some people. I think nominators maybe don't realize that they can nominate the same person year after year until they win. Some people certainly do, because I see those come in nominated by the same people. And then eventually sometimes they do win. It kind of just depends on the year, right? So maybe reaching out to past nominators to say, hey, this might be a good year to, resubmit that one. Is a great idea. I love the Young Persons Award. That's been kind of a side project of mine, is the idea of maybe having a youth commission. I have not had the extra brain cells to actually pull it together, but I love anything that engages our young population to make them feel connected to East Lansing in a way that they can make a difference. So I think that's great. If we are going to work with the schools, I would like that also to be a category that's maybe non-resident, because we do have a lot of schools of choice students in our schools, and I wouldn't want them to feel excluded from the nomination.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too, about the youth part. I think it sounds great, but if there could just be something mentioned like that it's a East Lansing School District person, anyone, can apply for it. I was wondering with the self-nomination piece, if people can just get guidance on maybe how they can be nominated. If it's, I don't know if you have to have like 2 people nominate you, but if the person that wants to self-nominate themselves, I'm sure they know maybe someone else that thinks highly of them.
So I had one occurrence when somebody called me to ask. In that situation, then yes. But if the person just goes ahead, fills it out, and then normally I review it by the deadline, so it's kind of beyond the time frame to state that. But I think by putting it out there, that would alert people to say if they feel that they are deserving of a crystal, then they can rally their supporters.
But yeah, I like your categories. I think it sounds like great ideas to get more people to apply and award more people in different categories and groups and stuff. So, thank you.
Well, I'm going to be the outlier on this. And as always, I love your suggestions, and you and I worked together on the Crystal Awards one year, and you did an exquisite job. I think the diversity category is great. I have a couple suggestions.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessary that we do this every year. I mean, from my experience being on this, I think there may be some years where, the people that are nominated are just, it's just not that good a year. So I think one of the things you might think about is, do we really have to do this every year? And the second thing is the youth category concerns me. Because I think what you and I saw when you were, when I was on that panel was you have this, and I'm sure Jesse probably saw it too, but you have like people's neighbors and, spouses and nominating and all that kind of stuff. And what concerns me about the student type of thing is, now we got parents involved. I mean, so, is somebody disqualified because their parent nominates them and things like that? And I guess just from my service on the school board, I just think there's plenty of opportunities for young people in our schools to be recognized by the school system. And so I'm just a little leery about trying to do that in the Crystal Awards. So, and then the only other thing is, the non-resident thing, I guess I have some concerns about that. And I realize I'm an outlier on this, but, so those are my thoughts for what they're worth.
Not an outlier on not having to do awards every year. I just don't like them to be watered down if you don't feel like you have a strong subset, or even save the individual for the following year if you don't have the the cross section of what you want for that awards. I'm just not big into. I don't want everyone to dilute the past people because we're getting down, and now it's where everyone's in the Hall of Fame sort of thing. I'm just kind of, it's a sports thing. I bet he's thinking like I'm thinking. Just, there's some really unique individuals and special people. I just don't want to water down the award. So. Closing comments or questions? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next up, item 7.3. Actually, well, I'll do, unless anyone wants a quick break, I can give. Can we take 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
All right, we're going to take 5 minutes and we'll bring you up. Sorry about that. You guys are already in motion. Sorry. Welcome back. Next up, item 7.3, discussion of third-party review report of the August 12th, 2021 rain event.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ron Lacoste. I'm the Acting Deputy Director of Public Works, filling in for Nicole McPherson, who could not be here tonight. She is here virtually if she's needed. Hopefully she will not be because she's feeling under the weather, but she's available nonetheless. As requested by Council, the city hired Tetra Tech, a well-respected engineering firm that the city has used many times over the years on different studies and engineering projects, to study that event and the storm that occurred that day. Who I have with me tonight is Dan Christian. He has worked with Tetra Tech for over 30 years and has spent that entire time focused on stormwater. As he said to me in the hallway before the meeting, he's spent his entire career focused on what happens when it rains. So he's well versed in this topic and can answer any questions that you have. And to top it off, he's also an MSU grad, so there's an added bonus there. So with that, I'll pass it off to Dan, and he can go through the review.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks for having me here tonight. I'd like to start, short presentation. I just want to go through a little background, talking to the residents, talked with the design engineer and contractor, and then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the rainfall and what happened, and then a quick summary. So as a background, I'm sure you're all familiar, but just to recap, there's a construction project in the East Glencairn neighborhood that was working on making improvements to the combined sewer, water main, and roadway, your basic infrastructure. During construction, there was bypass pumping because when you're working on the sewer system, sometimes parts of it are out of service, and so you provide a bypass pumping system to ensure drainage. And then we had a big storm event. And that storm event led to local street flooding, surface flooding, and basement flooding. So I was asked to help out and take a look at the data, little review, talk with the contractor who did the construction, the design engineer who is the consultant, and talk with some residents about their experiences, and then take a dive into the rainfall and look at the details of the rainfall characteristics. Here's a summary of the communication that we had with the residents. We ended up interviewing 5 residents. They were anxious to talk with us, several on North Lawn and some on Rosewood. They all experienced some flooding in their basement, or one individual didn't have a basement, but they had a crawl space that had flooding. They indicated, to the best of their knowledge, the flooding came in through a sump pump, maybe cracks in the walls, up from the floor drain. Not totally sure on exactly the source of the water, but those seem to be the common denominators. The water that was in the basement had no odor, which is a good sign. Sometimes when we see sanitary sewage backup, it has a very strong odor. This didn't. Nobody reported any odors. Most of the water was clear, or it was slightly cloudy from sediment. And then each of the residents took care of the water. Some took care of it themselves. Some hired somebody professionally to take care of it. But it all drained out. We received lots of photographs from the residents. So I included in the report, in the appendix, there's all the photographs that we had. Here are just a few of those. And then some observations and actions from the design engineer consultant and the contractor. So when this event occurred, the active construction was going on at the intersection of Sunset and North Lawn. Farther west on North Lawn, there was a bypass pump set up. And north of the intersection on Sunset, there was also a bypass. So 36-inch bypass over on North Lawn and a 27 on Sunset. They were both discharging the water to the east and south on Forest Street. When the contractor arrived on site, I think around 5 or 5:30 in the morning, they noticed that the entire roadway was flooded on North Lawn from Rosewood to West Lawn. There was also flooding in Robert E. Shaw Park. They opened some of the manholes and observed both upstream and downstream of the construction site that the sewers were running full. They were at capacity. When the capacity of the sewer downstream of the construction site when the pipe had additional capacity in it, then the contractor added an additional pump to increase the flow downstream. Just a quick note about why do we get flooding? Why does it happen? Well, it happens when the sewers can't handle the water. Think of it like a traffic jam. When there's just a couple of cars on the road, traffic moves along very nice and easily. But when you get too many cars on the road, everything slows down. The same thing happens with our drainage system. When there's a little bit of rain, everything flows freely and easily. But during really big storm events, it gets kind of stopped up. It can't all fit, and so it has to take a temporary pass, and it just waits. And it waits on our streets and roadways. And when the sewer downstream has the capacity, then it enters back in the collection system. So now let's take a look at the rainfall that occurred on August 12, 2001. I put together a map of rain gauges around the area, and I looked at lots of different rain gauge sources. I really like using NOAA rain gauges because they're professionally operated systems, but unfortunately they tend to be limited in locations. There's one at the Capital City Airport, which is the closest one available. And rainfall is highly variable spatially. It moves. How much rain you get in one location is not necessarily indicative of what you get across in other locations. We also looked at EnviroWeather. EnviroWeather is a site operated by Michigan State University. It's primarily for agricultural, also professionally operated rain gauges. Again, there's some down on campus, but there are none up in this particular neighborhood. They're a little farther away, which brings me to looking at two citizen provided rainfall information. The first is Weather Underground. These are private citizen weather stations that are installed at typically residents, sometimes businesses, and they are tied in with a network on the internet. So you can go to Weather Underground and you can pull up all this information. The second source is COCORAS, which is the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow. The difference here is the Weather Underground data is collected on about a 5-minute increment when you dig into the details. COCORAS is good information, but it's only daily data. It's manually read rain gauges on a daily basis. NOAA really likes the information. It's actually been shown statistically to be very good data, but it's only daily information. The table at the bottom includes the rain gauges that are within a 3-mile radius of the Glencairn neighborhood area. And then the picture shows the NOAA quantitative precipitation estimates. That's a fancy way of saying we're looking at radar information. So the radar data, when it bounces back off of the water droplets in the atmosphere, comes back at different frequencies, and the scientists will assign a rainfall amount based on that signal frequency that comes back. So they can use the radar data as an estimate to come up with a total precipitation. The red areas have higher precipitation. The lighter colors, greens, blues, have lower precipitation. So actually, according to the map, you can see the highest rainfall on this map is over to the east. The gauge closest to the Glencairn neighborhood was the Weather Underground KMI East L28, which received or recorded 5.4 inches of rainfall. If we look at our next slide, just a word about what is a 100-year storm. Oftentimes people think, well, you know, I got a 100-year storm, I had one last year, therefore I'm good for the next 99 years. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. A 100-year storm really refers to a rainfall event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So it's independent. There's a 1% chance this year that a storm event of that size or larger will happen. There's that same 1% chance next year. So it can happen and does happen even multiple times in a year as well as year to year. The table also provides some information on the annual exceedance probability, and really we like to use the term percent chance. I think it resonates a little bit better. So a 100-year storm has a 1% chance of occurring. A 10-year storm has a 1 in 10 or a 10% chance of occurring. So a little bit about what we mean by the recurrence interval. And I say that to preempt this next slide, which now looks at that rain gauge closest to the site that recorded 5.4 inches of rainfall in just over 14 hours. This graph displays NOAA Atlas 14 information, which is our best available statistical rainfall data looking at historical rainfall. This is published data from NOAA. This particular data was based in a report from 2013. 5.4 inches over 14 hours, if you just look at the total, that's equivalent to approximately a 140-year event. So it was a big rainstorm. What I want you to notice on this graph, however, is the shape of the graph relative to the NOAA data. Initially, in that first 30 minutes, we had maybe about an inch of rainfall in the highest 30-minute period. And that's equivalent to maybe a 10-year storm event. So it started out, it wasn't too bad, but then, you know, within that 1 hour period that had the most rainfall, we're already up to 2 inches of rain. And that's equivalent to about a 25-year storm. By a 3-hour duration with the most rain, we're all the way up over 4 inches of rainfall, which is somewhere between that 100 and 200-year storm event. So on an individual small increment, we're doing okay, but it's because it didn't let up. It just kept raining, and it kept raining hard, which is a little unusual in the rain patterns. Our next slide, I switch, and before we were just talking about rainfall and total rainfall. Now we're going to talk about rainfall intensity. Why? Because intensity is really what the engineers use to size the conveyance systems. Everything is designed based on the rainfall intensity. So we have the same background lines from NOAA, just expressed in rainfall intensity, the same red dashed line from our Weather Underground close rain gauge, and then I added a couple of lines. The green dashed line represents the assessment storm that the city currently uses to determine whether or not we're going to upgrade or increase the capacity of the sewers. If the capacity of the decision is made to upgrade, Then we go to the top gold line, which is the design storm pattern. The standard today is to use a 10-year design storm. This is a very, very common approach across municipalities all over really the nation. Very common in the Midwest and in Michigan in particular to use a 10-year design storm or 10-year level of service. But what you can see from this graph is that intensity we normally think is relatively short-lived. The duration is in the 15 to 30 minute for the high intensity, and then usually Mother Nature mellows out a little bit. In this particular case, the intensity kept going for quite a few hours, and that's really what caused the flooding. The storm event that we saw on August 12, 2001 was just more severe, higher intensity and larger total rainfall than what the city's design standard is for the conveyance system. And unfortunately, the result is when that happens, the result is local flooding. So it's really, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not surprising to have flooding when you have that size of a storm event. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can.
All right, so understand I'm not challenging your technical conclusions here, but so the bottom line here is we got a sewer system that's a certain size, and unless we spend millions and millions of dollars somehow making those pipes bigger, this kind of thing can happen when it happens, correct?
Yes.
All right. So again, understand I'm not challenging your technical conclusions, but I do have a couple questions on methodology, just because this is a data-driven community. And so, and understand you're talking to somebody whose office basement got flooded with 3 to 6 inches of water during this event. So you got these 5 people that responded to your questions. I think 3 of them I know. How were they selected? Was there some sort of general request for people along those roads to respond, or how did you gather that data?
We requested from the city staff suggestions on who to call, and they provided the first few names. And according to our contract, we were only supposed to talk with 3 people. There were people that were excited to talk, and so
yeah, I know
by
Dr.
word of
Strangus
mouth,
was,
they passed
Dr.
it on.
Strangus was excited to talk to you, I'm sure, with his engineering background. Okay, so there was some kind of limitation on the scope of work. So, and now I'm going to ask you for your expert advice, unpaid, on something else. Okay. So I am at the corner of North Lawn and Abbott Road, and a couple of things happened in my site, which I'm wondering if you took into consideration. Again, it's not that big a deal, but I'm just curious. So the contractor, who I have a lot of respect for, had sort of finished up in my location and put straw down on the grass, the median strip between the sidewalk and the road. And we have a continuing problem, including 3 weeks ago. You know, we had a rain event 3 weeks ago too. I don't know if you're aware of that. And so the combination of circumstances for my site was that I don't know exactly what you guys call them, the drain places, there's one on each side of North Lawn right up at Abbott Road. And the problem is stuff flows down Abbott Road, picks up debris on Abbott Road, comes around the corner, and then those drains get plugged. I mean, I've had that happen. I think I've been in that site now for almost 30 years. I've had that happen a lot. In this particular event, and I don't know if the sacks were there or not, okay? But in this particular event, then all that water combined swept all the straw down, and I have a big drain in my parking lot. There's also a big, huge city drain and all of the debris came down, covered up my drain, and so all of the water in my parking lot came into my basement, okay? Now, talking to my neighbors in the last 3 weeks since I've been out walking, a very similar thing happened this Saturday night. It was, I guess, 3 weeks ago, Mayor. Does that sound right? And I mean, do you have any expert advice for us or for our city staff in terms of how to mitigate this problem with those drains up there at the corner of North Lawn and Abbott? Because all of that water just sweeps down into North Lawn. Actually, the rental house next to mine, I talked to the maintenance guy this morning, I think it was. They had another 4 inches in that rental house next door to my building. I didn't have any water, but is there a fix for that? Can we somehow get it so those drains are catching that water coming off of Abbott Road?
So I heard a couple of things. One is the straw, and during construction, those drains are called catch basins or inlets. Those are protected during construction against soil erosion sedimentation, and that's a state requirement. We do not want that sediment to go out to the river. So those are protected during construction, and all of that information is laid out in the construction documents.
Okay.
There are lots of different ways and approaches to handle that during construction, different techniques that the contractor can use. And I'd be happy to have conversation with your staff about some ideas. I did not specifically look at the methodology that was used in the contract, but there are lots of options available. And then if there's a local problem with the inlets not having enough capacity separate from the construction, or anytime you cover up those inlets, that's a potential problem when it rains hard.
Happens all the time in a good storm.
Yeah. So, but if the inlets are free and clear, and then you still don't have enough capacity during the big storms, then that's something that your engineering group should be able to take a specific look at. I can't tell you what the problem is off the top of my head. It may be an inlet capacity issue. It may just be that the pipe downstream of the inlet doesn't have any capacity to accept flow, and so we're getting that traffic jam occurring.
Okay, but so it is a standard of care, a possible standard of care, that those inlets could be expanded to accept more water?
Yes, but it goes along with the capacity of the conveyance system. We also want to make sure that we don't move the problem downstream and flood somebody else out.
Well, I'm okay with that. Okay, just so you know. But it is pretty funny to see me out in, big rubber boots in the middle of a rainstorm with a rake out, raking the debris off of the city catch basins, which I've done probably 6 times over the last 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
But okay, it's my problem, but it's one of those deals where, and I know it happened this last rainstorm from talking to my neighbors on that street, and it's just going to keep happening. And if there's, Mr. City Manager, if we could figure out some way to fix that up there at that corner.
Just to speak to that real quick, I mean, I run the operations side of Public Works, and we have
I know you do.
a dozen locations where when the road floods, there's people like your neighbor whose yard is lower than the street, where typically it would just pond in the street, no big deal. In this particular case, it's a big deal. So we have about a dozen locations where if we have staff there, as soon as we get an intense rain event, we run to those locations first and try to clear the basins, because that rain that you're referring to 3 weeks ago, we sweep the streets very aggressively here in East Lansing, partially for that reason. And most communities sweep 2 or 3 times a year. We'll sweep the city more than a dozen times a year in a typical summer, and that's part of that effort to try to keep catch basins clear. But when you get nice, easy rains, it doesn't sweep the leaves and things down the street. But every time you get an intense rain event, it brings all that debris down and blocks the catch basins. And it's, no matter how much effort we put into keeping the streets clean, that's going to continue to happen. There's just no way to avoid that. I personally was out removing leaves that thick from catch basins that particular after that storm event, and it's not even fall yet. So it's just the nature of a heavy rain event carries everything with it and clogs up the open drains. But we do.
But there is a potential fix in terms of expanding the catch basin. I understand the pipe problem underneath, but it just seems to me that you could have a larger catch basin, and the debris wouldn't totally cover the catch basin. And I'm pretty selfish, but I'm partly asking this question from my neighbors on that first block in North Lawn, because everybody sees it. The water comes right down there, and it's a continuing problem. Which it'd be nice if there was some sort of fix. If there's not a fix, then okay.
And we are looking at that as well. We're televising the sewers on Abbott Road upstream of that to see if there's
To your
something
credit,
going on.
I mean, I know your guys were there.
Yep.
I think the day or two later, because I have a big drain. It's your drain that's down in the corner there, and you guys were clearing that out and stuff. And the interesting thing about that is that big drain never gets the water from Abbott, because it just goes past. So come on over sometime. I'll show you.
I think my question, obviously, looking at the data, and we're talking chance and those kinds of things, and that's retrospective towards today, kind of not accounting for prospective based on the new conditions or climate change and that kind of thing. So that's these are tricky. I'm in pharma, so I know how that kind of the number parts of this. Would that render, when we're looking at projects and doing those types of things and getting engineering, that means some things should be obsolete, correct? If we're considering doing something, and I know sometimes it's but could be price prohibitive, that means logically we have to go the direction that's going to support the prospective nature of where rain's heading, correct? Would that be the recommendation? Because I often see some of the projects and things we do are a lot of price consideration. And it sounds like the priority needs to be basin size, technology, yada, yada, moving forward, or else we could be building right into obsolescence as we're building if the prospective numbers are changing as we're building. You know what I'm kind of getting at here?
Yeah, and that could be a whole different presentation. I mean, it's, but yes, climate change is real. And I certainly am one that advocates for planning for the future, at least having the information so you can make an informed decision. But it is definitely changing, but that's a whole another discussion.
Yeah. So I think my advisory, obviously, to the engineering and the teams would be to just bring the hard truth. If it's a matter of we have to consider, it's going to, obviously, expense is going to be on the other end of the future, but it's kind of better off than, and obviously we usually like to do things when the streets are open, if we're doing some types of projects and those kinds of things, that we actually look futurely and try to do kind of prospectively what's going to last and what's going to kind of fit with what's next versus kind of where we're at. Because obviously it's an older city and we're kind of bound to some of our own limitations with what's under the ground, but I think moving forward that we're aggressively, no matter who's in these seats, trying to make those decisions for the future, and obviously whatever we can do to prevent these in the future. So that's just kind of my perspective. Councilperson Babcock.
Thank you. That actually segues into my question, which is, in 1992, East Lansing made a very forward-thinking decision, which was to put catch basins under Grand River, and they did that instead of separating storm and sanitary. I have no disrespect for that decision. However, climate change has really accelerated. I mean, it was one of those things you heard about in classes at U of M in 1988 and was like, wow, this could happen someday. It's here. I did hear stories of fecal material coming up in drains as I spoke to people last year, and I heard it again a few weeks ago when I was in the more eastern part of that neighborhood. I realize, I asked this before of Director McPherson, and she said that it was not worth separating storm and sanitary in that project last year because further downstream was not separated and it wouldn't matter. Considering that, do you think it would be beneficial now for the city to reconsider its 1992 decision to go with catch basins and pivot to a separated storm and sanitary system? It's not a political gotcha. I mean, I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm not really in a position to say. I think it's something that you could consider. Maybe you want to, take a look at specifically. But there are a lot of communities in the nation that have opted to stay a combined system, and they manage the combined sewer in different ways with tunnels and basins, and that's a very viable option. Sewer separation is also a viable option. Unfortunately, Mother Nature is changing on us, so it's kind of a the decisions we were making in '92, or maybe we would do something differently if we had to do it over. But hindsight's always 20/20.
Sure.
So.
Do you see places in our system where we should consider adding catch basins? I mean, is this something that we as a council should be tucking away in our mind that next time this comes up, or as we continue to do parts of this project? I mean, are there places that you'd recommend us putting catch basins?
I didn't specifically look at that. I focused just on this neighborhood and this storm event. That's what I was asked to do. Adding catch basins, again, the catch basins are kind of the inlet to the sewers underneath the roads. You can add some, sometimes they're beneficial, but sometimes they're not because the pipe itself doesn't have the capacity to let the water out. So you really have to look at the whole thing and not just the individuals. But certainly adding catch basins or changing it or operation and maintenance on the frequency of cleaning things. Some communities have had good success with adopt a catch basin programs where they ask the residents to go out and clean their catch basin. Maybe you put out it notices in advance, hey, it's going to be a big storm tomorrow. Can you go clean your catch basin? There's lots of different things that people try.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I am disappointed that you only spoke with 5 people. I appreciate that you went above and beyond the brief. However, there were a lot of different experiences, even side by side. But I did consistently hear about fecal material, brown material that was not leaves. It was, so many of the people I spoke with had that experience. But shifting to 3 weeks ago, and I don't know how to explain this verbally, so I drew a picture that isn't very visible. I was at this house on the far eastern point of Clarendon, where Clarendon meets Oxford. Excuse me, not Clarendon. Here we go. It's 9 o'clock. My speech just gives up. 3 weeks ago, with the heavy flooding, rain was coming down Sabron, and I stood at this house on the corner of Clarendon. Things had largely dried up from a night or two before, but I could still see that the rain was hugging the side of Clarendon. And then, rather than going to the catch basin, it was passing that, and because of the grade of the road, it was all landing at this house in the driveway of their home. This catch basin, or drainage opportunity, was dry. There was some water over here, sort of kitty corner. This one was dry, and that one was dry. Obviously, this house had a lot of water in its basement. I understood that the house over here also had a lot of water. I was unable to speak with the homeowners. I only saw it at a moment in time. The worst of the rains had come and gone. But the residents explained to me that that was pretty standard. Can we send someone out in this? Can we send someone out to look at that? I understand that Scott was going to go out and look at it. But when we've got this problem, do we change the grading of the road even though it was just done last year? How do we fix this?
And we are aware of that location, and we are looking at what went on there to see if we can figure out if something needs to be changed. We're not done with that analysis yet, but we are aware of that.
Okay. I mean,
Hi, can you guys hear
it was
me?
just disappointing, I think, for many in the community that we did a big project last year, and these folks didn't have a problem before. These folks didn't have a problem or much of a problem last year with the heavy rains. They have it now. I don't know if it's related to this work or not, but last year when this happened, I think many of us were under the impression that the project we were doing last year would prevent it in the future. And I guess we have an expert here, and what should we do to help people?
Can you guys hear me?
Nicole's trying
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Almost.
She was real quiet.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, sorry, Lisa, just to follow up on that resident, we are planning on having our engineering team go out there and survey that area. I just wanted to put that out there. To be able to see if we could, if there's an issue with the road grade line, so we could adjust the grade of the road as necessary. Excuse me, sorry.
Okay, thank you, and I hope you get a cough drop or something.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Director McPherson. You sound like you're really suffering. I apologize for that.
No, it's fine.
Poor Nicole.
And yes, we would all expect that these type of projects that we are doing would just help us in perpetuity with rainfall events. But when we get these increasing rainfall events, our sewers, even designed at our 10-year or above design standards, are never going, I hate to say never, are not designed to be able to take on those 100-year storm events. And that's just the reality of rainfall and climate change and sewer systems and urbanized cities.
I appreciate that, and I don't mean to challenge you. We are looking at ARPA dollars. We are a very fortunate community, and perhaps we need to change our priorities or perspectives because it's just unreasonable for people to have to live with fecal material coming into their homes. And I don't say that as a criticism of the department, but we, like many other places in the world, may have to change our thinking or change what we consider our standard.
I have something that kind of leads into that, if you don't mind. me
Sure,
taking
please.
it. So, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Dan.
So I understand the logic of engineering to a 10-year standard. I mean, we could obviously put, Paris-sized sewers underneath our streets and take the 1,000-year flood, and it would consume every penny that we have in our resources. So we have to kind of set the line somewhere, and a 1 in 10 seems much more logical to design for than a 1 in 100. But we are seeing these events increasing in duration and increasing in frequency. And so I guess I was kind of wondering about the standard of setting those 10-year statistics and 100-year statistics. At what point do we kind of change the bar of what is a 10-year incident, since we're seeing higher volumes more frequently? And I guess who does that standard? And am I right in it that it's happening more quickly? And does that mean that standard has to be adjusted more frequently?
So the standard, the 10-year standard, many communities use that to size conveyance. Some communities do it, that's lower standards. There's some Boulder, Colorado residential neighborhoods, you're lucky if you get a 2-year. New York City is in a 2 to 3 year level of service. Communities are designing. I'm working on a project for Miami right now. They design for a 5-year level of service. So it varies all over. Now, having pointed out some of the low ones, there are other communities that are very progressive, and they're adding additional criteria on top of that. And there are lots of options. There's lots of examples. But if you poll Michigan communities on sizing stormwater drainage systems, a 10-year is de facto. I mean, it's pretty much everybody.
Okay.
Keeping the standard, having the level of service is one thing. You could say, well, I want to design for a 25, but you could also just keep the standard and then change the base number. The base number is set, the rainfall data typically, in most cases, comes from NOAA. The report that it comes out of is called NOAA Atlas 14. It's an online system. The last time Michigan data was updated was in 2013. NOAA has no regular schedule on updating the data, and that's because, like all the other government agencies, they don't have a steady funding stream to guarantee it. Now, that may change. There's some federal legislation going through to set the bar so NOAA will get on a 5-year cycle of updating the rainfall. They have already started work on Atlas 15, which is supposed to take into account not just the more recent data, but the other problem that we have with the NOAA data is it assumes stationarity. The data that we use here in mid-Michigan, NOAA treats the information from 1880 the same as they do from 2010. We know that things have changed over time, and that's the concept of non-stationarity. And one of the assumptions stated in NOAA's data is it's stationary. They acknowledge that is incorrect, and the next update they're going to address that, but we have no idea when that next update is going to come.
Okay.
The other source is some other climate centers or the state of Michigan, Eagle, but I'm not aware of anybody working on this specifically.
Okay. So it's kind of seems like what we are assuming is a 10-year event or a 100-year event might not really be accurate any longer.
No, it's not.
Okay.
And there are methods and techniques to make projections on what's going to happen in the future. A little bit of it is a crystal ball right now. The climate scientists will tell you for sure things are getting worse.
Right.
As the atmosphere warms, it has the capacity to hold more moisture. We think that's going to lead to more increased storm events. But the details of it, we don't really know. But what I advocate is make some projections, make several different projections, test things out, use last year's storm event as a test case. Try different things and then make an informed decision on what to do.
And I think I don't want to tax Director McPherson, who is sounding very unwell, so I hope that she's gone back to bed and is no longer waiting on us. But I think, one of the reasons that we were working in that Glencairn neighborhood was to add capacity because we had seen flooding events in that neighborhood. And so I think even though our overall system has got a specific kind of design standard to it, we are adding capacity where we can and as we can afford to. And I think one of the things that we saw with the flooding event in August was low-lying areas like Robert Shaw Park. We also saw the wetlands next to our fire station fill up and overflow. And so I think that that's something that we have actually budgeted ARPA funds for, is more holding of surface water before it floods over. So I think when we look at the infrastructure costs of the sewer, it's just staggering to me how quickly money disappears
Right.
literally into the drain. So I think having an ongoing discussion, and I think with Director McPherson when she's feeling better, kind of projecting some of the areas that we are trying to add capacity and what standard we are designing to would be a good discussion to have. I think, you know, it's apparent that the need for sewer capacity is growing kind of faster than we can put pipes in the ground. But I do think that we need to start projecting out and assuming the worst kind of in terms of capacity. But then I also, you know, with respect to our community, we cannot guarantee that people will not have water in their basement. It's just an unrealistic capacity for a municipal sewer, so.
Well, of course, but this town loves data, this town loves planning, this town loves thinking ahead, and now is the time for us to start thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Just a quick item, Mayor, is that we are planning a study that will look at if there are additional things for capacity for holding tanks, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned. So hopefully we'll have a study that can have a plan that we can try to increase the capacity in that area, or retention of water through rain gardens, retention ponds, whatever it may be. So that's still
Also
to come.
slowing the flow of the water into the sewers so that it
More
doesn't
places
back
for it to
up.
be
Yeah.
caught and gathered. So, but that's something we'll be coming back to council with at some point.
I was going to ask a similar question, like city managers mentioned, just of the benefits of rain barrels. Would that be beneficial for us to consider?
So unfortunately, the answer is no. Rain barrels are great, okay? I have a couple at my house, but a rain barrel is typically about 55 gallons, and that fills up like that when it starts raining this hard. So what happens is we need to capture the peak of the rainfall, or the peak of the runoff event. And we need to do that, we need large storage systems. These small storage systems just don't have enough capacity. Rain barrels are fantastic for water conservation. Use it to water your garden or your lawn, trees. But from a stormwater management perspective of something on the size of a 100-year storm event, they just don't have enough capacity.
Thank you.
I believe that looks like it's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Mayor, could I suggest from an agenda standpoint, not that I'm not having a lot of fun here tonight, but 7.4, I mean, I've read the material, which is pretty self-explanatory. I'm wondering if we can just move through that quickly, and my question for the city manager is that going to require some sort of ordinance or resolution at an action meeting or not?
It's actually for council's informational purposes only. We have a very brief presentation. We can run through it, or if council is satisfied with the response, we don't need to run through it, and we will be doing this ourselves. If council feels you want to talk about it, we can do that, because it is.
I don't want to cut anybody off, but I'm satisfied.
Yep.
And I would just ask that the 7.5 discussion, I think we could defer that to another time unless there's some time parameter here on that letter.
Is there a time frame on that?
The program starts in September, but this is nothing that needs council action. We just wanted to make you aware of what we're up to and see if you had any discussion points or anything that you thought we should prioritize if we do pursue that program, but it's not.
Do you have an estimated time of how much you're talking?
No.
For you to present it?
I mean, it's really quick.
Okay.
But I can.
I'm going to follow Councilperson Brookover's lead on that, and we don't have to really push the envelope. I think the bigger question on 7.4 would be having conversations with the end users. This has been an ongoing problem, as long as the conversations are being had with them, so we can create a satisfactory solution for this. It looks really good.
And I would only suggest on that I couldn't quite tell from some of the emails, but I would suggest if we haven't, we get that to the Seniors Commission and make sure that they've sort of vetted that a little bit.
So it was shared earlier with Seniors Commission, age-friendly communities.
Great. Right.
Seniors Commission actually looked at it today, I think, and recommended approval. So I think the other folks to talk to would be the adjacent property owners and businesses, but we plan to do that.
So at this point, we're ready to move forward. The only issue, obviously, is a matter of cost, but that is an issue that we can endure with the current budget through Act 51 money for restriping. Is that correct? Ron, do you happen to know?
My understanding is that's where it'll
I
come
believe
from.
was it an $18,000?
$18,300.
So at this point, we'll move forward with the solution.
Huzzah. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for putting that together.
Yeah, well done, everyone.
And Cliff, did you want to do we want to have Cliff with a very brief?
Just a brief. I'm curious if we can keep it
Step
brief.
up.
Yep.
No pressure.
Thanks. Yeah, again, I'm Cliff Walls, the environmental specialist, and this is going to be brief anyways. We were approached a few days ago or last week by the Michigan Municipal League about participating in an EV Smart community program. It's funded entirely by the GM Foundation. It's kind of an a la carte resource where, depending on the individual community's priorities, you can shape your goals and metrics and outcomes based off that. Boiling it down, it's technical assistance to get funding for more EV infrastructure and advice on how to create relationships with dealerships, education for your residents. And we put together a sample or draft letter of commitment. There's no money involved. It's just staff time, probably a couple hours a month for peer networking, topical workshops, and stuff like that. And just want to make you aware of this, see if you had any objections to pursuing this, or if you had any input on particular outcomes or goals that you could see or that you would be interested in us pursuing if you were to sign up on this program. But
So just wondering, could we add this to consent agenda for next week? And then if council has a question or concern, you can pull it back off and council can approve it then?
Yeah, certainly.
Does that work for council?
Yeah, I have a brief question, if you guys wouldn't mind.
Shoot.
I think we've got one, I don't know how many ordinances we have that touch on electric vehicles, but I know we have a requirement in our development agreements that so many parking places out of every 100 be dedicated.
Mhm.
I'd just like to get feedback on whether that's the appropriate number, whether we should be increasing that or.
I will say at the webinar informational kickoff, or the kind of the sales pitch for this, they called out us as being an amazing example. I think they use
great.
like that flowery language like that, like this is.
Huzzah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
They used it as this is multi-state too. It's Michigan and Ohio, but they specifically referenced East Lansing as a leader in the region on this.
Cool. Well, cheers to former council member Altman for working on that.
I have a quick question too. I heard you mention GM, and I see the Great Plains Institute. And so just when it's presented on the consent agenda, if you could let us know, who it's coming from.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks. Great, thanks.
Thank you. And with that,
Thank you.
meeting adjourned.
Thank you, sir.